There's a few people in the back or at the front of the church. I'm just waiting for them to come forward. Welcome to the South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. In the summers, we have a scaled back program, but we are so delighted that today we have a guest speaker who is going to address one of the most critical issues of our time. And I'll give it a little bit more of an introduction to Carrie Galloway later. Thanks for being here today. The worship team is Stephen in the back at the sound. Maureen's here doing the streaming or helping with that. Cinnamon is going to make sure I don't goof this up too much. And let's see, I'm trying to think who else. Oh, Julianne and Melissa will be offering activities for children, but I only see two of them here today if they want. What else do I need to say? Glad you're here. Some of the Sundays we've been meeting in Murray Park. We couldn't get that space today, but it's lovely under a pavilion. It's wonderful to be outside. Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. I'm going to take this off. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes. You are welcome here. You are welcome no matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what awaits you in the future. You are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. You are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. My name is Lucy Malin. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to all gathered here in the sanctuary and those of you who are at home on the virtual streaming or Zoom. I'm not sure what the difference is, but I don't have any announcements. Does anyone have, is there anything urgent that we need to say? Brenda Voisard, who many of you know, is performing in a Murray County theatrical group doing Sister Act. It's great. It will be next weekend. It will be tomorrow night and next weekend out at the amphitheater in Murray Park if anybody's interested in an enjoyable, fun evening outside and seeing Brenda dressed up as a nun. So after the story, we'll have the children, if they're interested, go to the back and they'll have an activity. The summer services are at 9:30 just to beat the heat, now through September 11th, and we are required to wear a mask. I'm just not wearing it while I'm speaking. Please check on the website and in the Happenings newsletter that comes out once a week for the details of the next services. I'm going to light the chalice and invite you to join me in repeating the words that most of you know, or if you picked up or if you're on the, what do you call it? If you're on your phone with the order of service, the words are printed in the chat box, I believe. let us light our chalice. We invite you to stand in body, spirit, so we may do our lighting. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action. We gather this morning in the ancestral and current homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. This is a beautiful landscape tended by generations of families who lived, loved, and cherished this place. May we, as Unitarian Universalists, learn from these examples as we seek to live in harmony with this land and with one another. We acknowledge the complex histories that perpetuated deep harm upon our Native siblings and commit ourselves to authentically and with honesty engage in the necessary work that will produce justice for those who are disenfranchised, and that promote healing for the whole of the earth and all of its peoples. I have a really brief story that, I see I left my book down there. I'm going to do it up here. The children can come forward if they want a better look at these pictures. This is about, who is this? Can anybody see it? The Statue of Liberty. And there's a bigger picture in here I'll get out in a minute. So the Statue of Liberty, I'm going to read a poem by Emma Lazarus, who wrote this in New York City in November of 1883. A gala auction is being held to raise money for Liberty's pedestal. Famous artists are donating the paintings. I was asked to write this poem, to be sold along with the poems by Longfellow and Whitman. It's a great honor to be asked. I can write about anything I want, but I have had trouble writing lately because I'm feeling too sad. In the past few years in Russia, hundreds of Jews have been killed, thousands have been persecuted, their homes burned, their shops destroyed. They trek hundreds of miles across Europe with only the clothes on their backs. Does this sound familiar? Hoping to find ships to take them to America. We Jews are not new to hatred. Almost 200 years ago, my ancestors fled Europe too. Mine did too. America was a land of hope for them and is still a land of hope. Soon, when people arrive in the New World, they will be welcomed by a caring, powerful woman. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. So, how many of you kids have been to see the Statue of Liberty? Anybody? There are some adults. It is quite the moving thing, I think, for people who are coming on those ships to see the Statue of Liberty as they came in. If I can hold that so that you can see it. It's 300 feet tall. The torch itself is over 100 feet tall. And it serves, we used to have our newsletter called The Beacon, because we were the beacon for light and truth here in South Valley. So we can sing now, the children, as they go to the back and meet up with Melissa and Julianne. So I'll stand away, but I'll go now in peace, go now in peace. May the, here's Julianne. God come around you everywhere, everywhere. We're going to do our offertory now and then proceed further. It's our practice at South Valley to share our worship service offerings with a charitable organization whose work aligns with our values and principles. During the Easter egg hunt for justice this spring, the youngest religious explorers voted with the eggs they had found for Hawkwatch International to receive half of our worship service offerings during the months of July and August. Hawkwatch began in Utah here in 1986, has grown to become a leader in scientific research on raptors and community outreach. Hawkwatch widens both public and scientific knowledge as they gather data on millions of birds all across the western U.S. Amidst our rapidly changing landscape, they work to increase public awareness of raptors and the largely human-caused threats they face, aiming to encourage behaviors that help conserve our shared environment. Hawkwatch strives to sustain and protect these remarkable creatures and learns from them across the seasons. From spring nesting to fall migration and winter survival, please give generously in support of our precious Earth's interdependent web, as well as our youngest religious explorers here at South Valley who chose this fabulous organization. So if we can have the music for the offering. And if we can repeat the words that are in your, well, if you have a service thing. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. Thanks. I believe that was a recording of the Oakland Chancel Choir at the Unitarian Universalist Church there. Carolyn McDade wrote that, and she was a traveling minstrel in her day. She went around to various Unitarian Universalist communities and held workshops on songwriting and singing, of which I was very glad I got to attend one. She held at First Church. And if you look through especially our blue hymnal, there's several songs written by Carolyn that have become favorites of Unitarians across the nation. I'm going to read a poem to sort of set the mood here. This poem was written by a woman who attended the big women's rights equality march in Washington on Halloween near Halloween 2021. Her name is Sherry Lynn. On my back, upon sun-kissed concrete, greeted by a baby blue sky, where white wisps tease my senses to feel at peace on this Saturday afternoon. In this same sky where women and trans men, for whom I lie here in silence, as they died when their reproductive health care access was denied? Do their once tear-stained eyes, now dried, rest in peace? How is anyone believes such a heart-wrenching decision is as easy as the choice is for a man in the moment to put on a condom or not? The sky will yield to a deep red fire when more suffer, more die in Texas, Florida, Oklahoma, and wherever else is yet to fall. We know women of means will do what they do in the night's quiet, in more forgiving states, and yet such states of being a paradox. All of us on our backs, still hushed, yet deafening aside Teddy Roosevelt's statue, who once said, "This country will not be a good place for any of us to live in if it is not a reasonably good place for all of us to live in." Do we ask forgiveness for the decades, centuries of pain, shame, disdain, when freedom's breath was taken with the swipe of a pen by men who never live with such a choice? Such a choice made for them, collaring their body. Should vasectomies become a law for prevention or cause? Ha ha, you laugh. Of course not. How preposterous to think that such a decision could be mandated by a governmental body. That was in quotes. And here lies the shadow truth. My body, myself. Your body, yourself. Our bodies, ourselves. And here I lay for you on my back. These are grim times that we live in. We're faced with losing everything from the right to choose an abortion, privacy. Some marriages might be canceled. I'm like, what would I do? I've been married now for almost 9 years. We've lived together since '96. We're married, but they're going to probably take away that right. It is a dim political situation. But I think Carrie Galloway, who is here to speak to us about abortion and what the status is in Utah, and I've asked her some sort of specific questions she can cover, and I'm sure she will have time for a few questions at the end. She's been with Planned Parenthood Utah since 1981. She took over as executive director in '87. So she's been doing this long, hard job for a long time. And I know as an activist, I'm burnt out, but Carrie just keeps on going. And she's got a pragmatic outlook, and she meets it with humor and the deepest empathy for women who are, I'm saying mostly women, who are faced with this horrible decision that no woman makes lightly. I can guarantee you that. So I give you Carrie Galloway.
Well, thank you all for bringing in Sunday here at South Valley. I kind of feel like I'm at Old Home Week. Lucy and I have been activists together, as you've heard, since the early '80s. She moved to the state to do now work. I moved to the state just for the recreation, but I moved here from Madison, Wisconsin, and I was a gal of the 60s, let's face it. I was enjoying the idea of free sex, as they said at the time, but mostly I was concerned about safe sex. We can't enjoy rights without responsibility. That's from my Catholic upbringing. I'm the oldest of 6, went through Catholic grade school, learned my views of the world, that we all have a responsibility to take care of others in a team approach. And having been a gal of the 60s, when my then husband and I moved to Utah, we were considering having kids. And having been a gal of the 60s again, would I be selfish enough to have my own? Or would we adopt? Or then we had lived in communal organizations, would we co-parent? And Planned Parenthood of Utah had a class back then called Options in Pregnancy. And we took the class and we started out with 6 or 7 couples. I think we got down to about 5. And we had noted people in the community who came in and talked to us about how they had made a decision to create a family. It's not that it just happened. The moon was bright, the music was good, that type of thing. It was an active decision to create a family. And we ended up selfishly having 2 of our own. And they're wonderful adults, and one has given me a grandchild. So it all worked the way it was supposed to. And in working with Planned Parenthood, I learned about a job in the education department. And my degree is in elementary education. And back to being a gal of the 60s, I didn't do so well in the public schools. There were a lot of rules. And I liked playing with the kids. And I thought there needed to be an equal balance of play and learning. And I didn't always get along. So I had a background in education. I applied for the job. I wasn't their first choice, but I got it. The first choice didn't take it because of the pay. And I was willing. And that was in 1981. And here I am in 2022, still trying to solve this problem of safe sex. Because there's no fun sex without responsibility. And that's where I come to this movement. As Lucy said, I became the leader in 1987. And we've had challenges. I don't want to say every year, but most years. Challenges of policy that wasn't working for the people. Challenges of rules and regulations that we had to make sure we were part of to provide health care. And as health care has become more and more sophisticated, I remember when we first got cash registers, and people said, well, no one wants to hear the ding of a cash register in a Planned Parenthood clinic. But our auditors said, you need to account for the money. And so we had cash registers. We now have electronic medical systems. We pass every audit for every payer. We are the stewards of the National Family Planning Program. We have contracts with all healthcare insurance corporations. We play by the book. We do things right, we do things ethically, and we make sure that those who can't afford or not are allowed to be part of an insurance system get access to basic health care, which is reproductive health care and family planning. And so I'm pretty darn proud of where Planned Parenthood is and what we've become, and the almost 40,000 people of Utah that we provide health care to every year. Not all of it is subsidized, but everyone is offered subsidy. When we have the national program, we are provided with subsidy on the federal poverty schedule. When we don't have the federal subsidy, we're still providing everyone who needs it the health care that they deserve to lead their best life. And so, you know, it's a good feeling for the staff in our healthcare system to be able to provide excellent quality health care to the people of Utah. But unfortunately, that's not what everybody thinks of Planned Parenthood. When they think of Planned Parenthood, the word abortion comes up. And that's because our core belief is that comprehensive reproductive health care is what we stand for. We make sure that everybody has the information that they need. They have access to affordable health care. And at the core, they have the right. And that's what gets us, I guess, into trouble with a lot of the people in Utah. So just to frame for you a little bit of where I come from, why I do this work every day, and now we'll talk about the challenge we're facing right now. Planned Parenthood of Utah has supported the concept of comprehensive reproductive health care from the beginning of time. We did not perform or provide all aspects. Each new method of contraception that comes into play and gets approved by the FDA, we incorporate into our system. When new systems of education for young people, for young adults, or for seniors come out, we incorporate those methods of learning and discussion for everyone to accept the responsibility of good sex. We also stand up for the right of everyone to create their family how they choose and be able to live and contribute to the community, which is Utah. And so we have always provided the education. We've always kept up with the health care. We have always supported the right, but it wasn't until about 12 or 14 years ago that Planned Parenthood actually provided abortion, though those who oppose us thought we did, and they thought we were lying. But that's how it goes. We have always been at the forefront of standing up for everyone's right to start their family and maintain their family. When it became necessary because the providers in Utah were retiring, Planned Parenthood stepped up and has been providing comprehensive, including abortion, health care for the people of Utah and Idaho and Wyoming and anyone else who shows up. The legislature has taken it upon themselves to be the arbitrators of our rights. We have fought here in Utah. When I joined in '81, we had just passed a law here in Utah that said that minors could not hear about family planning or abortion without parental consent if state money was involved. And so in 1981, we set up this framework in Utah on an age structure on who could learn about what was legal, what was available, how to get it. Luckily, Planned Parenthood of Utah has never been the recipient of state money. We have, except for a few years in the late 80s and 3 years just past, we have been the stewards of the National Family Planning Program, money that comes from the Department of Health and Human Services. It is affectionately called Title X, Roman numeral X. Anyway, we have always been able to then follow federal law, and federal law feels that privacy is important with reproductive health care, and so minors can have access to family planning services should they be responsible enough to ask for them. So we have been able to provide, again, comprehensive reproductive health care to the people of Utah. We have had to fight battles over and over again in Utah having to do with those rights, whether minors could buy condoms in the grocery store. I always loved that battle. We have fought, more recently, we had to sue the governor of Utah, who decided that we couldn't hold any contracts for doing any work in Utah because someone had produced bogus videos that we were selling baby parts. That wasn't happening. We won. They had to pay the court fees. Anyway, we have been pretty lucky with our lawsuits over the years. We have challenged laws for waiting periods, for what people need to be told, whether there could be misdirection of sexual and reproductive information. But of late, there has been certainly a push to do TRAP laws, which are called Targeted Abortion Restriction Programs. And we have fought many of them, but we have also figured out how to make sure, without humiliation, without stigmatizing people, that women, people who can get pregnant, and families can again realize their dreams. And one of those that happened recently was the state mandated information that people have to receive 72 hours before they can even make an appointment for an abortion. So they have to watch a video. There were tests, but you don't have to pass them. But you do have to try to take them. You have to sign your own permission slip. You have to have a face-to-face conversation where the state's wishes are reiterated to you, is that they want you to continue this pregnancy, and then you're allowed to make an appointment. So for many people, this can take a week, 10 days to go through this process before they can even have their abortion. We have worked to use technology to help people with this face-to-face conversation to make sure that they can do it online with a visual that we can guarantee that if they hold up their driver's license to their face in the screen, we can see it, verify who they are, and cover all the rules. We have been, I have to say, exceedingly creative, clever, and worked with all those who want to make sure that reproductive health care is available to people. And it brings us to where we're at today. We knew for years that if a case got to the Supreme Court challenging the 1973 Roe versus Wade beyond where Casey challenged, that we could use this right. There have been talk of the Supreme Court overturning 50 years of precedent and turning it back to the states to make their own rules. Those who oppose comprehensive reproductive rights and services were smart, organized, and persistent. They had worked for years in fits and starts to figure out how to thwart this system. And they figured it out this year. First, we had the trial run where Alito's draft opinion was leaked. I kind of was thankful for that because we had planned for years how to address it, but until it happens, you really don't know what you're going to do. You really don't have an idea of what's going to happen. And so when it was leaked, and everyone went, whoa, this could really happen, we had a trial run. We had a pretty good size gathering at the Capitol, people speaking up, how can we help, what can we do? We weren't sure at that point. We just knew that people had to talk about this as a reality. They had to look at how they would talk to their family, their friends. Who would they support? Who would support others in the web going back to the 60s of helping people get health care that is stigmatized, that has repercussions, that costs money, and is scary. I think we took it fairly seriously, but everybody figured, nah, they won't really do this. And then they did it. At the end of June, they said, I want to say they said, take this. And boy, did we have to take it. And what it did is brought it back to the states. And the states had also got fairly well organized. Remember those trap legislations that I spoke of a few minutes ago? The state of Utah used to be first in line with trap legislation. And then about 10 years ago, it got to the point where we weren't the first anymore. Other states were getting nastier, more punitive, coming up with ways to thwart people who can get pregnant in being able to decide on that pregnancy. And in 2020, the legislature had a particularly nasty year of trying a number of pieces of legislation that were aimed at humiliating people who can get pregnant. And the people stood up. In fact, all women senators stood up of both parties and left the room in disgust. And the guys on the other side said, whoa, we got to try a new tactic. And so they did a trigger law, which said if any court overrules or does anything that allows Utah to make our own rules, we're canceling any right of a pregnant person to be able to be in control of their own body. Immediately, it was a trigger law. If something happened here, we could do what we wanted. And that's what the Supreme Court did. Now, we had learned that to say that the trigger law happened, our legislative council, which are the lawyers for the legislature, had to look at the ruling of the higher court, being the Supreme Court, and match it up with the wording of our trigger law. And if they coincided, then the trigger law could go into effect. Many of you might have seen those people who were celebrating that day and their press conference talking about how they were so excited that they would be saving babies. Now, remember, our trigger law just covered what happens in Utah. Those people who oppose or want to rule all bodies in Utah, if you can go to another state and get your services, they don't care. But you just can't do it in Utah. So they were talking about all the babies they'd save. They also talked about, to me, a particular egregious lie, that the reason we had such low abortion rates in Utah was because we had such good sex education. Oh, my living room had a lot of words. And he must have said it 3 times. And then we had the great Carrie Ann Lisby, who said that they weren't taking control away from women. Women could control the amount of sperm they took in. I've got some particularly creative friends who are coming up with some sort of gauge for that one. They say they'll share the proceeds, but we'll see what happens. One has to make light of what is nothing but pure garbage at this particular point. So again, we held an event at the Capitol, and rumor is that there were 5,000 to 8,000 people. And looking out at that crowd, I didn't count them all, but I lost track. The lawn was full, the plaza was full. People who came together to express their frustration, which is better than doing it violently, doing it destructively, personally, possibly drinking too much, or getting in fights with your family, or just getting depressed. We got together and spoke about what we believe Utah should believe in. And around 6:30 that night, just before the speakers began, the Ledge Council said the trigger law was in effect. Planned Parenthood of Utah provides termination services, abortion services, at 3 of our health centers. In Logan and in Salt Lake, our 9th East Clinic, it is provided only with medication abortion. Misoprostol, mifepristone, to drugs which stop a pregnancy from continuing. At our Metro Clinic on 10th East, we provide medication, abortion, and surgical. Saturday, we had 13 people scheduled for termination at our Metro Clinic. The staff who had to go into those health centers, even though the people have been told for weeks that the Supreme Court could come up with a ruling that would stop their access to health care, we had staff who had to go into that clinic and face pregnant people and tell them that they no longer could make a decision about their own body. That the elected officials in Utah had commandeered that right. There were no elected officials to take the brunt of that anger. It was our staff. We had trained for years on how to deflect, how to be compassionate, how to help them problem solve what we could do. But because this trigger law that was passed in 2020 was not passed with any forethought, was not passed with any hearings, it wasn't passed with any input from anyone who might care about pregnant people or provide health care for pregnant people. It was passed vindictively by people who want to control pregnant people. So in the lead up to this trigger law being affected, Planned Parenthood of Utah had to employ a lot of new lawyers. And I've never had to work with criminal lawyers before. Now, if any of you are criminal lawyers, I love you dearly, but you got a different way of looking at the world. And as we tried to figure out what we needed to do to protect our staff from being accused of aiding and abetting someone breaking the law in Utah, there were no good answers. So all the work that Planned Parenthood had done to help our staff know how to give a warm handoff to another state, to a sister healthcare provider who we had worked with to take our people, to help a woman or a pregnant person figure out where they could go, where they might know people, what they had for transportation, what they had for money, what they could wrap their heads around. We had to tell our staff, you can't do, because we don't know if we can protect you until we figure out how the state is looking at this trigger law. It was devastating to our staff who are such compassionate, powerful people, only wanting to help people make their dreams come true in a safe way. And so it left us in a quandary. Back to the creative nature of us, we had been working for months with other lawyers, reproductive health lawyers, reproductive justice lawyers, on how to fight this trigger bill. And those clever lawyers had realized that because Utah is a fairly new state, and the people who created the Constitution in Utah actually realized that women might have a brain and something to offer, had some pretty good equal amendment clauses in the Utah Constitution. Plus, there was a community sense of personal integrity in your own decision-making. And so we're fighting Utah with Utah. And we're looking at the Constitution and how it could be interpreted to give a right of people to make their own decisions. And on the other hand, if any of you have read our arguments in the Tribune, which has been incredibly generous with publishing both the state's case and Utah Planned Parenthood's case, know that we're also pointing out that there is unequal harm to pregnant people. And people who can get pregnant in Utah actually are more than 50% of the people in Utah. And when you disadvantage those people emotionally, financially, physically, every step of the way, and commandeer their right to their own bodily integrity, we see it as a problem. And so we filed that case on Saturday. It didn't save the pregnant people in the waiting room, but we told them what we're doing. We told them hang tight if they could, because it's a time-sensitive thing, that we hoped we could get a temporary restraining order the beginning of the week, and that when that happened, we'd get them in and do their procedure. So we filed that on Saturday. We had all the papers ready to go, signed. Monday afternoon, we had a TRO hearing. We're on our second judge. The first one reclused himself, never told us why. But we're on the second judge, and by all accounts, he was not an ideologue. And so we went into this hearing with a pretty good feeling that he would actually listen to what we said. And he ruled from the bench, and we got our TRO for 14 days, which allowed us to get people in. I felt so good. My office is on the 3rd floor. The clinic that provides surgical abortion is on the lowest floor. There was a cheer when the judge announced an immediate TRO. I ran downstairs, told them, all right, I don't run, I took the elevator, downstairs and told them that the people waiting in the waiting room hold tight. In about a half an hour, he'd sign it, and we could begin care again. I know I'd seen a couple couples waiting in the parking lot. They could have their dreams. A process that they had put in place a week, 10 days ago would actually happen for them. So we had 2 weeks of that. Then we had to prepare all our papers for our next hearing, which is the preliminary injunction, which happened a week ago tomorrow. One of the state's issues is that Planned Parenthood didn't have standing. Standing means that we can sue on behalf of our clients. This has always been an issue throughout reproductive justice times. But actually in Whole Women's Health about 5 years ago, which the Supreme Court held, one of the issues were, can Planned Parenthoods or independent clinics sue on behalf of their clients? And it was determined again that we can. The state felt that we shouldn't be allowed to do that in Utah. So they made a big deal about that at the TROs. So when it came time for the preliminary injunction, we worked very hard with incredibly brave women, people who could get pregnant, who were going through the informed consent process, and asked if any of them would be willing to give a deposition about why they just couldn't go out and get themselves a lawyer and sue the state so they could have an abortion. And 3 incredibly brave people stepped forward. And last Monday, when we presented our case for preliminary injunction, we had 3 depositions of women who talked about how they had gotten pregnant, their life situation. They didn't know any lawyers. What a surprise. I mean, people who come to Planned Parenthood for care come to us for care because we subsidize their care. They need help. These women said that they couldn't go public to be an out person in a lawsuit. They didn't have the time. They didn't have jobs that they could meet with lawyers and take time out for depositions and things like that. We did these depositions with them on Saturdays at their own convenience. And they said mostly they didn't have money to pay. And when the judge gave his ruling from the bench, one of my favorite statements from him was, how could the state think that for a person to get health care, the most efficient way was to get a lawyer and sue the state? I mean, really now. Another of my favorites, when he ruled in our favor, he actually said the words that maybe the state should have thought before they leapt with the trigger law. Maybe they should have thought about how it would affect pregnant people and families to take away their bodily integrity. And for me, the most important message from the judge is these issues need to be in the public domain. These issues need to be talked about so that Utah decides how we want to treat the people of Utah, how we want to govern the people of Utah, how we want to take away their own bodily integrity without giving anything back to make their lives easier. And for me, that's why Planned Parenthood is fighting this case. Now, one of Lucy's questions was, well, what can you get for health care? You can always, until someone tries to take it away, you can always get family planning. You can always get birth control. We will subsidize your birth control. We will educate you on your methods of birth control to make a good decision. And if you change your mind, we'll do it all over again. Because we know that one is not the solution for all. So we will work with you on your family planning needs. We will work with you on your education and community outreach. And we will never stop working for your rights. But you're going to have to check the day and the time to see if we can provide abortion. Because last week, I hate to say it in the house of the Lord, but it was a shit show. The judge ruled from the bench that it was a preliminary injunction. Usually, it goes into effect when he signs the papers. The state, after he made that comment, got really convoluted in their arguments of wanting to know what it allowed the stay in. Was it just the trigger law? Was it later term abortion? Was it 18-week abortion? And they were just confusing the whole situation. The judge said, I'm sure I can come up with the words to make this right. But then he didn't come up with the words publicly and sign the papers. He's decided to approach it in a negotiation with the state and Planned Parenthood. That's all good and fine. but it wasn't the usual way of doing things. So Tuesday we couldn't provide, and we had 3 full schedules. Wednesday, we were really getting nervous because nothing was signed. So we called the judge, and he said, well, I'm just going to do it a little differently. Of course you can provide care. I mean, the relief that we had. But it was like, duh, couldn't you have told us? So it's hard. It's hard on everyone. It's hard on a person who's got a plan. They followed all the state rules, and they want to execute their plan. And they can't because we don't feel that we have the protection to provide the care. It's hard on the staff who can't provide the care. It's hard on me who keeps getting the questions of what to do. You know, it is a mixed up, crazy world that the Supreme Court has created. And if you turn on NPR or even KSL News, they're all saying it. Nobody knows what's going on. And Utah's not alone. And so I so appreciate Lucy putting together this for all of you to be able to hear what we're trying to do, what you can do in talking to your family and friends to keep what needs to happen out there, that we need to discuss this. We need to look at it. We have to look at what's fair, what's just, and what's within the law. Thank you. Us old ladies, we take a minute, but we're safe.
Sure. Okay. I'll just finish up the formal part of the service, and then if you could sit if you want, and then Carrie will take questions. So one, I did forget to say thank you, the blessing of the offering, for all that we've received and all we have found courage to give. May we be truly thankful. These gifts are a blessing to South Valley and to Hawkwatch. So, and I also forgot to say that Brenda created this incredible altar. And I also wanted to say that Anna Renshaw has done a lot of organizing, rallies, getting people activated, and let's give her a hand. So, please stand, and we will extinguish the chalice. Stand as you are willing and able, or willing and able. The words are, we extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. We hold each other in our hearts until we meet again. Now, I'll ask Carrie to take some questions. And some of you might not want to stay for this, so please feel free to leave. The actual service is over, but it will be probably quite interesting to hear what Carrie can say. So if you, I guess just stand if you have a question, and we'll see if we can answer it. Anybody? You can go ahead.
I really just wanted to ask, what do you, as these are preliminary injunctions and everything, if they do become permanent, what are you recommending to these women to do as a contingency? You know, if it's suddenly, a week from now or whatever.
We have the preliminary injunction, and then the judge will eventually sign it. What that allows is the state to appeal it. And what they plan to do, at least in their statement, is they plan to go for an immediate emergency voiding of the preliminary injunction. Depending on what happens there and the way the judge is ruling, my guess is that will be denied. Then we would go for the permanent injunction, and this is all the standard way of going through to get to be a court case. Once the permanent injunction is provided, then the trigger law is put on hold until the case is decided, which could take about a year, which would be a deep sigh of relief for the state of Utah, the majority of people. One thing is on the trap laws. In 2019, we had a trap law for an 18-week ban on abortion. It never went into effect because we sued. We got the preliminary and then the permanent injunction, and the case has been in the courts for 3 years, waiting to be decided, and on pause twice for other Supreme Court decisions that might have changed things. Once the Supreme Court ruled and eliminated the right to Roe versus Wade nationally and sent it back to the states, we dropped our 18-week case, but without prejudice, which means we can rehear it again if we need to. Then the state put back in their 18-week law because we provided care to viability. So that's what we're living with now. So if we get the permanent injunction in a couple of weeks, I hope we can have that by the middle of August. That will put everything on hold till the case is decided. And then whoever loses gets to appeal, and it can go back to the Supreme Court. So anyway, it's a long road ahead. What we're hoping is to get the case out and talked about, and all of the issues out on the table, and a decision, and not put a bogus trigger law into effect until that can be decided.
What can people do to help?
Right now, because we can provide care, it is talking about it, getting people thinking about where they really stand. Planned Parenthood has done polling in 2020 and 2022 that say a majority, 80% of Utahns believe that Utah has enough laws. Almost that number of people believe the decision should be the pregnant person's decision, not the legislature's. And it's about 50-50 with a little bit in our favor that Roe should not be overturned. You know, people believe that that should be the law of the land in having a decision. So we've got to get people talking and speaking up about how they believe. That legislatures should not have commandeered our bodily integrity.
I have a question from someone. Is it safe to report rapes in Utah?
It is, as it always has been, but it could depend on who you report it to, and that's why if you use a support service like a rape recovery center or one of the other sane nurse programs, they can help you through that process. It's one of the things that the legislature has been so cavalier about, that women, pregnant people, should be punished and have to disclose what they've done before they can be eligible to solve their health care problems. But there's no real good system for doing that. It was just a few years ago that they admitted that they had thousands of rape cases that had never even been tested from people who had offered up their body for that. You know, the trigger law is a law with so much Swiss cheese that I lose my words in my frustration about what we don't know about what they want other than to control your life.
Can you talk a little bit about the abortion pill and if it will be available over the counter?
There are two types of abortion medications. One is the morning after, which can be used 72 hours post an oops type situation where either the birth control failed or you forgot to use it. That is one medication that right now is actually over the counter. It's fairly expensive. You get it through Planned Parenthood. We subsidize it. But that, for the majority of the population, is not considered an abortion. Some people do, but they're going to twist the words for everything. Then there's medication abortion, which is mifepristone and misoprostol. There is a lot of confusion about that. The rules in Utah say face-to-face with the physician to get a prescription, and it is covered by the trigger law as being illegal. Medication abortion is popular. It's over 50% of abortions in this country because the pregnant person is in control. It is a forced miscarriage and an emptying of the uterus with the interaction of the two drugs. It has been because it can't be controlled as easily with laws because no one's license is on the line. People can get these drugs foreign. They can get them in states where there aren't rules like trigger laws on them. It has caused problems all over the country. Our colleagues in Montana who provide that right now are not providing prescriptions for people from Utah if the trigger law is in effect, because you could take the drug in Montana and come back and have your miscarriage in Utah, and that would be against the law. So nobody really knows. So when the president says that he's going to make sure that people can do interstate commerce and stuff like that, it's not clear, or as clear as mud, what's going to be able to be allowed. Anything else?
Is there a rally in the upcoming future?
There is a family picnic at Jordan Park with roller skating games. We're asking for donations to put together for care packages for people who have to leave the state. There's entertainment, food trucks. Again, a chance for people of like minds to get together and to talk about how they want to help spread the word about how Utah should be.
And when is that?
The last Saturday in July. I think it's the 29th.
Oh,
Sorry. So if the worst is to happen and the judge rules that the trigger law can go into effect, is there any plan for any legislation or any push to try to change the laws to at least make it better?
Well, there's a lot of talk about solidifying what they want. We will always try to mitigate those laws to the benefit of pregnant people and families. But it'll be a free-for-all at that point. As Lucy has pointed out, all the people who are part of this incredible congregation who have been on their own working for reproductive justice here in Utah, your own Ellen Passat, I've been working with since the mid-'80s in the national world of Planned Parenthood, and you're so lucky she's ended up here for her retirement because she is a great activist. And I was so excited a couple of years ago when she moved to Utah because she's been in the trenches, as Lucy and I have, for a long time. But we can all play a part in making Utah a better place to be a pregnant person.
Are there any other questions? Well, thanks to Carrie and thanks for Ellen for your work and Anna for your work, and let us all go out and work for equality, equal rights, reproductive freedom, whatever else is in that long list of everything they're trying to take away from us. And I think we have to not be cavalier. This is serious. We don't know what they're going to do, but they're certainly going to try something.
Yeah.
So, thank you.